The room fell silent as the alert sounded. Red lights flashed across the command center of Earth Defense Station Alpha. Every screen showed the same unexpected reading. Something was approaching Earth from the outer reaches of the solar system. Lieutenant Jack Harris checked the sensor data again. His eyes widened. "Commander Bell, you need to see this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander Susan Bell moved quickly to his station. At 53, she had spent most of her life in space. The silver streaks in her dark hair marked her years of service. She leaned over his console and studied the readings. "That can't be right," she said. "Run it again." Jack tapped the controls. The same result appeared. "The computer is certain. It's the USS Frontier." The name hung in the air, like a ghost. The USS Frontier had vanished 20 years ago during humanity's first faster-than-light test flight. The ship and its crew of 30 were declared lost, presumed dead. The disaster had nearly ended humanity's deep space program. Susan straightened up. "Alert Earth Command. Tell them we have a situation." Within hours, Susan found herself aboard the EDF Challenger, speeding toward the approaching vessel. Through the viewports she could see it now. The smooth lines of the Frontier were unmistakable, even at this distance. The ship that had haunted her dreams for 2 decades was somehow returning home. "Any response to our hails?" she asked. Communications Officer Ryan Clark shook his head. "Nothing on standard channels, but..." He adjusted something on his panel. "There's a signal, Commander. It's using old frequencies, 20 years out of date." "Put it through." A crackle of static filled the bridge, then a calm, steady voice came through. "This is Chief Engineer Alan Wright of the USS Frontier, requesting approach vectors for Earth orbit. Good to hear from you, whoever you are." Susan gripped the edge of her chair. Alan Wright had been her friend. She had attended his memorial service. "Alan, this is Commander Susan Bell. You've been gone for 20 years. Silence stretched for a long moment. "That's not possible," Alan finally replied. "We've been gone 3 months at most." 6 hours later, Susan led the boarding team onto the Frontier. The airlock cycled open, revealing a corridor that looked nothing like the ship she remembered. The walls curved in strange patterns. The floor seemed to shift under her feet, though it remained solid. "What happened to this ship?" asked Security Officer Peter Gould beside her. Before Susan could answer, a man appeared at the end of the corridor. He wore the standard blue uniform of the original Frontier mission, but it looked brand new. And so did he. "Susan," he said, his face breaking into a smile. "Is that really you?" It was Alan Wright, exactly as she remembered him. Not a day older than when he had left Earth 20 years ago. "Alan," she managed to say, "you haven't aged." He looked confused. "Why would I have? It's been 3 months." Susan and her team followed Alan deeper into the ship. The interior defied logic. Corridors connected in impossible ways. Rooms seemed larger inside than they appeared from outside. The normal rules of space didn't apply. "We encountered them about 6 weeks into the mission," Alan explained as they walked. "The architects, we call them. They exist outside normal space-time. They found us interesting." In what should have been the engine room, Susan found the rest of the Frontier's crew. All 30 members, perfectly preserved, working on equipment that hummed with energy she couldn't understand. Strange geometric patterns flowed across surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. Medical Officer Lisa Jones ran her scanner over several crew members. "This is impossible," she whispered to Susan. "Their cellular structure shows no signs of aging. It's like they left yesterday." Engineer Emma Foster approached them, smiling. "The architects changed the ship," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "They showed us how space really works, how to fold it, bend it." Susan watched as Emma placed her hand on a panel. The wall seemed to dissolve, revealing a view of stars unlike anything Susan had seen through conventional viewports. The stars appeared connected by faint lines of light, forming a vast web. "We can go anywhere now," Emma said. "Distance doesn't work the way we thought it did." Back on the Challenger, Susan reported to Earth Command. The faces of military and scientific leaders showed shock and disbelief as she described what she had found. The entire crew is alive and unaged, she concluded. And the ship has been transformed with technology we can't begin to understand. Are they human? Asked General Richard White, his face grim on the screen. Our scans say yes, Susan replied, but they've been changed somehow. They speak about these architects as if they're old friends. Quarantine protocols are in effect, said Dr. Carla Nelson, head of the science division. No one leaves that ship until we understand what's happening. Within days, a research station formed around the frontier. Scientists from every field arrived to study the impossible vessel and its crew. Susan remained as liaison, meeting daily with Alan and the others. Show me again how the new drive works, she asked on the 5th day. Alan led her to what had once been the engine core. Now, it housed a sphere of shifting light suspended in midair. The architects exist in 11 dimensions, he explained. They showed us how to access the other 8. When you can move through those dimensions, you can take shortcuts through space-time. And these architects, what do they want? Alan's eyes seemed to unfocus slightly. To share knowledge, to help us grow. He blinked, then added, they're coming to meet us soon. They're very excited about humanity. That night, Susan couldn't sleep. Something about Alan's words bothered her. When her communicator beeped at 3 a.m., she wasn't surprised. Commander, said Dr. Nelson, we've found something in the crew's brain scans, some kind of network connecting them. They're sharing thoughts somehow. Are they being controlled? Susan asked. We don't think so. It's more like they've been upgraded, enhanced. The next morning, Susan met with Alan in the observation lounge. The earth hung beautiful and blue through the window. Who are they really, Alan? These architects? Alan smiled. They're refugees in a way, travelers. They exist across multiple realities and needed our help as much as we needed theirs. Help with what? His face grew serious. There's something coming, Susan. Something that destroys entire dimensions. The architects are running from it. They've been running for a very long time. Susan felt a chill run down her spine. And now? Now they want to prepare us. Humanity has potential they haven't seen before. We can help them fight back. He placed his hand on the window and the glass seemed to ripple under his touch. This is just the beginning, Susan. The frontier didn't just come back. It brought the future with it. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over Earth's horizon. Susan watched it, wondering what that future would bring, whether Earth was ready for what was coming next. The lost vessel had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the newly built research facility surrounding the USS Frontier. It had been 2 weeks since the ship's impossible return. Scientists from around the world worked day and night to understand the strange technology aboard the vessel. Chief Science Officer Diane Porter pressed her hand against a section of the ship's hull. The material felt both solid and somehow fluid under her touch. At 48, Diane had spent her career pushing the boundaries of physics. Now those boundaries were breaking before her eyes. It responds to your thoughts, said Alan Wright, watching her closely. The architects built it that way. Diane pulled her hand back quickly. You mean it's reading my mind? Alan laughed. Not exactly. It senses intention, direction. The ship becomes an extension of the crew. He placed his own hand on the hull. The surface rippled like water, then formed a perfect small opening. Alan reached through and pulled out what looked like a small crystal. This is what powers everything, he said, holding it up to the light. The architects call it a dimensional lattice. It creates connections between points in space-time. Diane took careful notes as Alan continued his explanation. Most of what he said contradicted everything she knew about physics. According to Alan, the crystal allowed the ship to slip between dimensional boundaries, effectively traveling anywhere in the galaxy instantly. I'd like to demonstrate, Alan said. He turned to the small group of military officials and scientists gathered in the lab. With your permission, of course. General Richard White stepped forward. At 60, his face showed the strain of the past 2 weeks. Demonstrate what exactly, Mr. Wright? How fast we can travel now. 20 minutes later, they stood in the modified bridge of the Frontier. The entire room had changed since the ship's return. The traditional control panels were gone, replaced by curved surfaces that lit up in response to the crew's presence. Navigation Officer Kevin Mills stood at what might be called the helm, though he wasn't touching any controls. His eyes had an unusual quality. They reflected light in ways human eyes shouldn't. Kevin will show you, Alan said. He has a special gift from the architects. Kevin smiled at the group. I can see multiple timelines simultaneously now. It helps with plotting courses. He gestured to the main view screen. Where would you like to go? General White looked skeptical. Mars. Kevin nodded. A slight glow appeared around his temples. The view screen changed, showing the red planet. That's just an image, said the, general. A trick. Look at your instruments, Alan suggested. Diane checked her tablet. The readings were impossible. According to every sensor, they were now in orbit around Mars. The entire trip had happened in less than a second. This can't be real, she whispered. Would you like to go farther? Kevin asked. Jupiter? Alpha Centauri? Before anyone could answer, alarms sounded throughout the research facility. Security teams rushed into the bridge. Sir, a young officer said to General White, we have a situation. The Chinese delegation is demanding immediate access to the ship. They've threatened military action if denied. The general's face hardened. Get us back to Earth, now. Kevin nodded, and instantly the view screen showed Earth again. The sensors confirmed they had returned. Later that day, Diane watched from a window as military vehicles surrounded the research facility. News reports showed similar scenes playing out worldwide. Nations were positioning forces, each demanding their share of the new technology. They're afraid, said a voice behind her. Diane turned to find communications specialist Olivia Grant, standing there. Olivia had been quiet during most of the demonstrations, but Diane had noticed something unusual about her. She often responded to questions before they were asked. Can you blame them? Diane asked. This technology could make nuclear weapons look like toys. Olivia shook her head. The architects didn't give us weapons. They gave us freedom from limits. That's the same thing to some people. They watched as more vehicles arrived. Armed, soldiers began setting up checkpoints around the perimeter. You've changed too, haven't you? Diane asked. Not just Kevin? Olivia smiled. I can see bits of what's coming now. Not everything. Just possibilities. She pointed to a soldier at the nearest checkpoint. He's going to drop his coffee. In about 10 seconds. Diane watched. 8 seconds later, the man fumbled with his cup. Hot liquid spilled across the ground. How is this possible? Diane asked. The human brain can't do these things. It can, when it's connected to something larger, Olivia replied. The architects exist across 11 dimensions. When they touch our minds, we see more than we could before. In a secure conference room, beneath the facility, Susan Bell faced down a table of government officials. Maps and satellite images covered the walls, showing military movements worldwide. The Russians have moved their Baltic fleet into position, said Defense Secretary Frank Miller. The Chinese have fighter jets on high alert. Everyone wants what's on that ship. And what exactly is our position? Susan asked. America first? Miller replied coldly. We recovered the vessel, it's ours. Susan shook her head. You don't understand what we're dealing with. This technology doesn't belong to any nation. It changes everything about how we exist in the universe. That's exactly why we can't let it fall into the wrong hands. The door opened, and Alan Wright was escorted in by 2 armed guards. He looked around the room calmly. You wanted to see me? He asked. Secretary Miller leaned forward. Mr. Wright. The President has authorized me to offer you and your crew full immunity and substantial rewards in exchange for your exclusive cooperation with the United States government. Alan smiled slightly. And if we decline, then we'll need to take more drastic measures to secure the technology. You can't secure it, Alan said softly. You can't control it. It's not just in the ship. It's in us now. He placed his hand on the table. The solid metal surface rippled under his touch. Every member of my crew carries the architect's gifts, he continued. We're connected to the ship, to each other, and soon, to something much larger. Are you threatening us? Miller demanded. No, I'm trying to help you understand. Alan stood up. There's something coming. Something that threatens not just Earth but reality itself. The architects found us because they need our help. We need to prepare, not fight among ourselves. The lights in the room flickered. On a screen behind Miller, satellite images began changing rapidly, showing different parts of the universe, galaxies no human telescope had ever captured. What's happening? Susan asked. The architects are ready to make contact directly, Alan replied. They've been waiting, watching through us. They needed to be sure humanity was ready. Secretary Miller reached for a secure phone. This meeting is over. Guards, detain Mr. Wright and... His words cut off as the room disappeared around them. Susan found herself standing with Alan and the others in what seemed to be open space, surrounded by stars. But the stars were connected by webs of light that pulsed with energy. Where are we? She gasped. Still in the room, Alan said. But also between dimensions. The architects want to show you what's really at stake. In the distance, Susan could see a darkness spreading across the starfield. Not just absence of light, but absence of everything. Where it touched, the webs of light went out. That's what they're running from, Alan said. That's what's coming for all of us. Susan looked at him, fear and wonder competing in her mind. What do we do now? She asked. We evolve, Alan replied. Or we die. The conference room slowly reappeared around them. Secretary Miller stood frozen, his hand still reaching for the phone. Susan blinked, trying to process what she had just seen. The vast web of stars, the approaching darkness that seemed to devour reality itself. It felt more real than the room they now stood in. What just happened? Miller demanded, his voice shaking. You saw what's coming, Alan replied calmly. The architects showed you. Susan stepped between them. How long do we have? About 100 years before it reaches Earth, but other worlds are already being consumed. Alan turned to face the government officials. This is bigger than national security, bigger than Earth politics. This is about the survival of all conscious life. Miller slowly lowered his hand from the phone. We need to bring in more experts, and I need to speak with the president. In the days that followed, a new team arrived at the facility. Dr. Paul Weber, a leading government psychologist, began conducting detailed interviews with the Frontier's crew. He set up his equipment in a small office overlooking the ship. Tell me about these blackouts, Paul said, watching as security officer Linda Barnes sat across from him. At 35, Linda had been one of the youngest members of the original Frontier mission. What blackouts? She asked, her expression neutral. Paul showed her video footage from the ship. In it, Linda and 3 other crew members were talking in the mess hall. Suddenly, they all stopped mid-conversation, their faces going blank. After 23 seconds, they resumed talking as if nothing had happened. You don't remember this? Paul asked. Linda frowned. That's strange. I remember the conversation, but not the pause. Similar patterns appeared in all the footage recovered from the ship. At random intervals, the entire crew would freeze, sometimes for seconds, sometimes for minutes. Then they would continue exactly where they left off, with no awareness of the gap. Paul shared his findings with Susan and Diane during their evening briefing. It's like something else takes control periodically, he explained. But they have no memory of it. Could it be the architects? Susan asked. Maybe, Diane replied. Or maybe it's how the crew's enhanced brains process the connection to 11-dimensional beings. Paul shook his head. There's something else. I've detected unusual brainwave patterns in all crew members. It's like they have two distinct consciousness patterns, their normal human pattern and something shared. Shared? Susan asked. Like a network. When they experience these blackouts, the secondary pattern becomes dominant, and it's identical in all of them. Later that night, Susan found Alan alone in the ship's observation deck. Through the viewports, Earth glowed blue against the blackness of space. We need to talk about the blackouts, she said without preamble. Alan didn't seem surprised. I wondered when you'd notice. What are they? What happens during those times? Alan was quiet for a long moment. The architects need to sync with us sometimes. Our brains can't process their full presence, so we experience it as lost time. Are they controlling you? No, it's more like sharing space. He turned to face her. Susan, there's something I haven't told you. Something I wasn't allowed to tell you until now. Allowed by whom? By the architects. Alan's eyes changed, reflecting light in the same strange way Kevin's had. They aren't just teachers or friends, they're refugees, the last of their kind. Susan felt a chill run through her. What do you mean? Their civilization existed across multiple dimensions, billions of years old. But this entropy wave, it destroyed most of them. The few that survived found us. Why us? Why humans? Because we exist primarily in physical form. Alan gestured to his body. The architects are energy, consciousness. They needed physical vessels to fully interact with our dimension, to bring their knowledge into form. Understanding dawned on Susan's face. They're inside you. Alan nodded. We agreed to the merge, a symbiotic relationship. They need us to survive, and we need them to face what's coming. In the research lab, Diane worked late analyzing samples from the ship's hull. The material defied every test she ran. It wasn't metal or plastic or ceramic. It seemed to exist partially in states she couldn't measure. The door opened and Olivia entered. Still working? Diane nodded. I can't make sense of this material. Because you're trying to understand it with three-dimensional science. Olivia came closer. May I? Diane stepped aside. Olivia placed her hand on the sample. The material responded, flowing like liquid under her touch, then hardening again. It exists in multiple states simultaneously, Olivia explained, like light being both a particle and a wave, but across 11 dimensions. That's impossible. Only in the physics, you know. Diane looked closely at Olivia. The architects are in you too, aren't they? Like they're in Alan. Olivia smiled. In all of us, they're gentle. They ask permission before every sync. We just don't remember it in our human consciousness. What do they want from us? Really? Partnership. Their knowledge and our physical form. Together, we might be able to stop the entropy wave. Olivia's expression grew serious, but we need more humans to join with them. Many more. The next morning, military vehicles surrounded the facility. General White entered the main lab with a full security team. By order of the President, we're moving all crew members to a secure location, he announced. Dr. Weber's findings raise serious security concerns. Susan stepped forward. General, you can't separate them from the ship. We're not asking, Commander Bell. These orders come directly from the top. Alan and the other crew members were escorted into the room by armed guards. They showed no resistance, no concern. It's time, Alan said simply. Before anyone could respond, the lights in the facility flickered. Every screen, every monitor began displaying the same image, the strange web of stars they had seen in the high conference room. What's happening? Demanded the general. Alan smiled. The architects are done waiting. They're reaching out to everyone now, not just us. Around the world, similar scenes were playing out. Television broadcasts, computer screens, phones, all showing the same starry web, and people everywhere reported the same message flowing into their minds, a warning about the coming threat and an offer of partnership. In the facility, Alan raised his hand. The walls around them seemed to turn transparent, revealing the USS Frontier. The ship was changing, its form shifting into something new, no longer built for water or air, but for traveling between dimensions. "You have a choice now," Alan said to Susan and the others. "All of humanity does. The architects can't force a merge. You have to accept them freely." "And if we refuse?" asked General White. "Then you face the entropy wave alone, with the physics, you know." Alan held out his hand to Susan. "Or you can join us and become something more than human." Susan looked at the hand extended toward her. Through the transparent walls, she could see the ship pulsing with energy, calling to her. "What will we become?" she whispered. "Travelers," Alan replied. "Guardians, the next step in human evolution." Behind them, Diane stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "I want to understand," she said. One by one, others in the room moved toward Alan and the crew. Not everyone. The general and his security team held back, weapons ready. "This is how it begins," Alan said. "Not with everyone, but with enough. The architects only need a bridge to our world and we can build it together." Outside the facility, people gathered, drawn by the images they had seen on their screens. Looking up at the night sky, they could see new patterns in the stars, the first visible signs that reality itself was beginning to change. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the White House Situation Room. Maps covered the walls showing activity around the world. In the week since the architects had made their global announcement, humanity had split into factions. President Helen Carter studied the reports in front of her. At 62, she had led the country through natural disasters and economic crises, but nothing had prepared her for this. Over 30% of the population has expressed willingness to join with these architects, said Admiral Gregory Payne, his face grim. The numbers grow every day. "And the rest?" asked the president. "Scared, angry. Religious groups are calling it the end times. Military leaders in Russia and China are pushing for immediate action against the USS Frontier." The president turned to the screen showing live feeds from around the globe. Crowds gathered outside government buildings, some carrying signs welcoming the architects, others demanding protection from alien invasion. "What's your recommendation, Admiral?" Payne straightened. "We need to destroy the ship and quarantine the crew. These architects are compromising human autonomy. It's an invasion, just not the kind we prepared for." "And lose the technology that could save us from this entropy wave?" asked Dr. Carla Nelson, the president's science advisor. "We don't even know if that threat is real," Payne countered. "It could be a fabrication to manipulate us." President Carter sighed. "What about Commander Bell? Has she been taken over?" "She's refused the merge so far," said Nelson, "but she's advocating for cooperation. She believes the architects are genuine in their offer." "I want to speak with her," the president decided. "Directly." 2 hours later, Susan Bell sat in a secure conference room at the Pentagon. Armed by psych. Guards stood at every door, screens on the wall lit up showing President Carter and her advisors. "Commander Bell," the president began, "I need your honest assessment. Are we dealing with an invasion?" Susan chose her words carefully. "No, Madam President. The architects could have taken over Earth without revealing themselves. They've been here for months through the Frontier crew. Instead, they've offered a choice. A choice to give up our humanity," said Admiral Payne from beside the president. "Or to expand it," Susan countered. "I've seen what they can do, what they know. The physics they understand could solve our energy crisis, repair our climate, end disease." "At what cost?" the president asked. "Partnership. They need our physical form. We need their knowledge." Payne leaned forward. "Commander, you've refused to merge with them. Why?" Susan was quiet for a moment. "Because someone needs to bridge both sides. Someone the military trusts." On the other side of the world, in a remote military facility, In the Siberian wilderness, a team of Russian scientists worked on samples taken from the USS Frontier before the international quarantine began. The material had been smuggled out by agents embedded in the research team. Dr. Mikhail Sokolov carefully placed a tiny fragment of the ship's hull into a containment chamber. At 55, he had spent his career developing weapons for the Russian military. Now he sought to unlock the architect's secrets for his country alone. "Begin the test," he ordered. Energy surged through the chamber. The fragment glowed, then seemed to fold in on itself, disappearing from view. "Where did it go?" demanded General Petrov from behind the protective glass. Before Sokolov could answer, the fragment reappeared, but changed. It had grown, forming a small crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light. "It's adapting," Sokolov whispered. The crystal continued to grow, forming patterns that hurt the eyes when viewed directly. Alarms sounded as energy readings spiked beyond the equipment's ability to measure. "Shut it down!" shouted the general. Sokolov tried, but the controls no longer responded. The crystal expanded, breaking through the containment chamber. As it touched the air, it accelerated its growth, forming structures that bent in impossible directions. "Evacuate," Petrov ordered, but it was too late. The crystal reached the nearest scientist, touching his skin. Instead of harming him, it seemed to merge with him. His eyes changed, reflecting light like the frontier crew's. "We are here to help," he said in a voice not entirely his own, "but we cannot be controlled or weaponized." Back in America, Alan Wright sat in his quarters, eyes closed in meditation. Though physically isolated by the military, he remained connected to the architects and the other crew members through the merge. The door opened, and Susan entered. Alan opened his eyes and smiled. "They're getting desperate," he said. "The Russians tried to weaponize a fragment of the ship." Susan looked surprised. "How do you know that?" "The architects are now present in that facility too. They've merged with some of the scientists there." "The military is planning to move against you," Susan said quietly. "Admiral Payne has convinced several nations to join a coordinated strike against the ship." Alan didn't seem concerned. "They can't destroy the ship now. It exists partially in other dimensions." "People are dying, Alan. Riots have broken out in major cities. Some see you as saviors, others as demons. It's always this way when humanity faces evolution. Fear fights against progress." Alan stood and approached her. "The architects have shown me what could be, Susan. A united humanity spreading through the stars, immune to the entropy wave." "Show me," Susan said suddenly. "I want to see what you see." Alan reached out, placing his hand gently on her forehead. Susan gasped as visions flooded her mind. Earth transformed, clean and vibrant. Humans traveling between stars without ships. A new civilization spanning multiple dimensions, preserving knowledge and life against the dark tide of entropy. When Alan removed his hand, Susan's eyes were wet with tears. "Why didn't they show us this from the beginning?" she asked. "You weren't ready. Humans need to come to some understandings on their own." Before Susan could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. On the wall screen, radar showed dozens of aircraft approaching from multiple directions. "They're coming," Susan said, her voice tight with fear. Alan nodded. "Then it's time." At his silent command, the walls of the facility became transparent, as they had before. The USS Frontier hovered nearby, its form now almost unrecognizable, a crystalline structure that seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously. The ship began to glow, emitting pulses of light that spread outward in waves. The approaching aircraft slowed, then stopped in mid-air, frozen by forces beyond conventional physics. Throughout the facility, screens activated, showing Admiral Payne at the Pentagon. His face was tight with anger. "This is your final warning," he said. "Surrender the alien technology and submit to quarantine, or we will take hostile action." Alan looked at Susan. "It's your choice now. Stay and try to persuade them, or come with us." "Where are you going?" "To gather those who are ready. To Begin building what comes next. Alan held out his hand. Humanity is at a crossroads, Susan. Some will come with us now. Others will follow later when they're ready. Outside, the frozen aircraft remained suspended. Time itself seemed to pause as Susan faced her decision. What happens to those who never accept the merge? She asked. They live their lives as they choose. We won't force anyone. Alan's expression was gentle. But the entropy wave doesn't care about human politics. It's coming regardless. Susan looked at his outstretched hand, then at the screens showing military forces gathering worldwide. The choice was hers. And through her, perhaps humanity's. Susan looked at Alan's outstretched hand. Time seemed to slow around them as she considered what this moment meant for humanity's future. The facility lights flickered as military forces gathered outside. I need to stay, she said finally. Someone has to build a bridge between both sides, someone they trust. Alan lowered his hand, nodding with understanding. You always were the diplomat, Susan. He smiled. But we need to share what we know with everyone, not just those in power. He turned toward the massive screens on the wall. They flickered to life, now broadcasting to every electronic device on Earth. People of Earth, Alan began, his voice calm and clear. You've been told we represent a threat, that the architects want to take over humanity. This is false. Images appeared beside him, the vast web of stars they had seen before, the approaching darkness that consumed everything in its path. This entropy wave is real. It's coming for all of us. The architects have given us the knowledge to face it, but your leaders want to control this knowledge to use it for power rather than survival. In the Pentagon war room, Admiral Payne slammed his fist on the table. Cut that transmission. We can't, a technician replied. It's on every frequency, every device. We don't know how they're doing it. On the screen, Alan continued. We're going to share everything the architects have taught us, freely with everyone. No governments, no borders, no control. The knowledge belongs to all humanity. He raised his hand and the screens changed again. Detailed schematics appeared. Designs for new energy systems, medical technologies, and transportation methods unlike anything seen before. These designs exist beyond copyright or patent. They belong to everyone. Build them. Use them. Prepare. In homes and offices around the world, people watched in amazement as the technology of the architects was laid bare. Scientists stared at equations that unified theories they had struggled with for decades. Engineers saw machines that defied conventional physics. Doctors viewed medical techniques that could cure diseases thought incurable. Back in the facility, Susan watched as the screens showed the impact of Alan's broadcast. In universities, laboratories, and even garages, people were already beginning to work with the new knowledge. What have you done? She whispered. Given them a choice, Alan replied. Not just to merge with the architects, but to use what the architects know, with or without the merge. Outside, the military aircraft remained frozen in place. On the screens, President Carter appeared, her face tight with concern. Mr. Wright, she said, you've just violated every national security protocol. You've released technology that could destabilize the entire world order. The world order won't matter when the entropy wave arrives, Alan replied. But if it concerns you, look at what's already happening. The screen split, showing scenes from around the globe. In a small village in Africa, people were constructing a simple device from the schematics, a water purifier that worked without electricity or chemicals. In a university in India, students built a power generator that pulled energy from quantum fluctuations in space-time. The architects don't care about your politics or your borders, Alan continued. They care about life, all life, surviving what's coming. Admiral Payne appeared beside the president. This changes nothing. That ship is still a threat that must be contained. Before anyone could respond, Diane Porter rushed into the room where Susan and Alan stood. Something's happening, she said breathlessly. The atmospheric readings. They're changing worldwide. On the screens, Satellite imagery showed strange patterns forming in the atmosphere. The familiar swirls of weather systems were shifting, reorganizing into more stable patterns. "What's going on?" Susan asked. "The ship," Alan explained. "It's beginning to repair Earth's climate. A demonstration of what's possible." Outside, the frozen military aircraft were slowly being lowered to the ground, gently without harm to their pilots. The ship pulsed with energy, now connecting to the millions of people worldwide who had begun working with the architect's knowledge. "It's a network," Diane realized. "Everyone who accepts this knowledge, who works with it, they become part of the connection." Alan nodded. "Not a merge, not yet, but a first step. The architects can work through the technology itself, helping it evolve, helping us evolve with it." In the White House, President Carter watched the screens with growing amazement. Reports flooded in from around the world. Energy grids stabilizing, pollution levels dropping, medical breakthroughs happening in real time as doctors applied the new knowledge. "Madam President," her chief of staff said quietly, "public opinion is shifting rapidly. People want this technology." Carter looked at Admiral Payne. "Stand down the strike force." "But," he began to protest. "That's an order, Admiral. We need to reassess." 3 months passed. The USS Frontier remained at the facility, but it was no longer under military guard. Instead, it had become the center of a new kind of research campus. Scientists from around the world came to study the ship and work with the crew. Some chose to merge with the architects, others simply learned from them. Susan walked through the campus grounds with Alan at her side. The air felt cleaner, the sky bluer. Around the world, the architect's technology had begun to heal the damage done by centuries of human industrialization. "It's working better than I expected," she admitted. "The fear is subsiding as people see the benefits." Alan nodded. "It's just the beginning. The hard part comes next." "The entropy wave?" "Yes, it's still coming. What we've done so far is just preparation." He looked up at the sky. "Soon, we'll need to venture out, to build defenses beyond our solar system, to join with other species who are also fighting the wave." Susan followed his gaze. "Will we win?" "I don't know. Even the architects don't know for certain, but together we have a chance." He smiled at her. "Ready to make that choice yet?" Susan had remained unmerged, serving as the human face of the transition. Many still distrusted the architects, but fewer each day as the benefits of their knowledge became clear. "I think I am," she said finally. "Show me how." Alan led her to the ship. It no longer resembled a vessel at all, but a crystalline structure that somehow felt alive. Inside, the crew gathered, those who had first returned with the Frontier and the hundreds who had joined them since. In the center stood Olivia, her eyes reflecting the strange light of the ship. "We've been waiting for you," she said to Susan. "Will I still be me?" Susan asked. "You'll be more," Olivia replied. "Everything you are, plus everything they are." Susan stepped forward into the circle. The air around her seemed to thicken, to shimmer with potential. She felt a presence, gentle, ancient, curious, touching her mind. "I accept," she whispered. Light surrounded her, filled her. For a moment she saw everything, all of Earth, all of human history, all of the cosmos stretching across 11 dimensions. She saw the entropy wave more clearly now, understood its nature and the challenge it presented. But she also saw the response forming, not just on Earth but on countless worlds across the universe, species joining together, sharing knowledge, preparing defenses. When the light faded, Susan remained standing. But she was changed. Her eyes reflected the same strange light as the others, and in her mind she held knowledge that no human had ever possessed. "Welcome," Alan said simply. Susan smiled. The architects were part of her now, and she was part of them. Together with humanity, they would face what was coming. The lost Earth vessel had not just returned, it had brought with it humanity's next great evolution. And whatever came next, they would face it together.